Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, April Seifert. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who is inspired to action, and that's my number one goal, to inspire you, my listeners, to take action in your lives. Each week, I get to interview some of the most inspiring women, and I'm bringing those interviews to you. Let's do it. Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, April Seifert, and I'm so excited for you to meet this week's guest. She is legitimately somebody who has made a massive shift in my life. Her work and the topic that we're going to be talking about today is something that was nothing short of transformational for me in my own life. And so I absolutely knew that I had to reach out to her via social media to see if I could get her to come on the podcast, because I really think that her content area is something that all of us can benefit from, in particular, a way that we can help live an even more fulfilled, enjoyable, wonderful day-to-day life. So with that, I'm so excited to welcome Lisa Wimberger to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
This is wonderful because I've sort of joked with people. I've been really looking forward to this interview for a while now. And I joked with people that when I sent you the first Instagram message that I sent you, I felt like a fangirl. I was messaging like, oh my God, hi, I love your stuff and I really want you to come on my podcast. It was like this fangirl message.
Oh, that's so funny. Just ask my daughter and she'll cut me down to a nice humble size. It's always humbling being the mom of a 13-year-old, because people will write to me that they love my work and then I'll go home and my daughter's just complaining about me. So it all balances out.
She's like, can I roll my eyes even more? Oh my gosh. I love it. Well, this is wonderful. I'm so excited to have you on, and I was so pleased that you were willing to do this. Before we get launched into the amazing work that you're doing and your book and your website and all of the great stuff that you're doing, help my audience get to know you a little bit and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm addicted to a bunch of things. I'm addicted to meditation. I have been my whole life, and that is a core piece for me. I am addicted to music. If I do not play it or dance to it or hear it, I'm really grumpy. I am a dancer. I am a drummer. I am a bit of a workaholic in terms of spreading my message and my work to people in need. And I'm a service caregiver. I'm just my whole life, I've been in service to people when they need help. That's kind of my archetype. And I'm a protective, passionate mom and a really happy wife. So that's kind of like my archetype, I think.
That's wonderful. That's a great way to get to know you. And I love that. You start out by saying, I'm addicted to these things. I'm like, ooh, where is this going to go? Yeah. But it goes to great places. I love it. You're in very great company here. So the reason why I found you is, I was searching through, I actually happened to be looking at audiobooks, and I came across this book called Neurosculpting. And I was really curious about it initially for very academic reasons. So my background is I have a PhD in social cognitive psychology. The plasticity of the way that we store information and the way that our brain works is something that I studied in my PhD program. And so that type of thing is always really interesting to me. I also have a bit of a background in meditation. So that part of it was just personally interesting. But what I didn't expect, and so I'll just set the audience up for why this is such a big deal and why I'm so excited to have you on. What I didn't expect was the amazing shift that would happen to me as I was listening to your book and actually doing the exercises in the book. So the very quick backstory, and I'm actually planning on recording an episode where I go into this a little more. So probably by the time this comes out, there will have been a preview episode with a bit more detail on this backstory. But when I had my first child, I actually experienced pretty severe postpartum depression, like a lot of us do. I mean, it's incredibly common for women to experience that after they have children. And as a result of the experiences that I had when I was really struggling with that, I was left with best way I can describe it is PTSD-like symptoms. So certain situations, very specific triggers would almost, the best way I've been able to describe it is it would break my brain. Like I would lose the ability to focus, to think logically, to regulate my emotions and calm myself down. I was just incredibly anxious in these very specific situations. So that was not on my mind at all. I picked up your book. I started doing these exercises, and throughout the variety of exercises that were in the book, my mind instantly started going to these triggering situations. And that's what I ended up working on in the book. Shockingly, it made the biggest shift that I can even describe. And so I just want my audience to understand that when I say I'm thrilled this week to have you on, I absolutely am, because your work is so transformational.
I love to hear that. My entire mission is to give pragmatic application-based tools to people. I'm a tool girl. I like concrete practices, mostly because I didn't have any concrete application for my meditation practice for decades. When I said earlier I was addicted, I meant that in both the positive and the negative sense. When I first started meditating as a child, it was not for my greater good. It was an escape. It was an absolute dissociative escape. And it was for me for decades. When I finally realized that I was escaping, it was as enticing an escape as drugs. And when I realized I was anesthetizing with meditation, and it was not curing or helping my stress disorders, I had to shift gears into, I need tools. I need real tools, real practices. I need science. I need help. So when I hear you say the practices made the difference, that's all I do this for, is so people can say, wow, there's a practice that really makes a difference. Not a motivational speech, not a list of I shoulds, not any of the fluff. There's real practice that I can do every single day, like brushing my teeth that will prevent cavities, like scrubbing my mind that will prevent degeneration and brain fog and PTSD cycles. And so it makes me so happy to hear you say that.
Oh, it was night and day. To the point, I'm a little bit fast forwarding here, but to the point that after, obviously my husband is very close to me, and he's, a very involved dad. And so he saw me suffer through this period and really felt like his hands were tied and he wasn't sure what to do to help me. And he was obviously supportive for whatever I needed to do to feel better, but he just wasn't sure what to do to help me. And he saw how difficult this was. And then pretty soon, a few weeks later, it was that fast. It's crazy. A few weeks later, after I had been practicing these exercises really religiously, he came to me and he said, "What did you do? Like, wow, you are different. What did you do? I haven't gotten a text message where you've felt panicked. You seem so different. What happened?" Like, it was so noticeable that my husband came to me and said that.
Oh my God. I love that.
So tell my audience, we've mentioned that it's neurosculpting, right? Tell my audience what that is and how you stumbled upon it, coming from, being addicted to meditation as this escape and a way to sort of numb things. How did you get from that to this, and what is it?
Yeah. So here's the backstory. I had a lot of physical trauma growing up. I had an undiagnosed seizure disorder since I was 15. I had all sorts of accidents and traumas, but mostly the seizure disorder that was plaguing me was the root of why neurosculpting emerged. So backwards: seizure disorder, in denial, undiagnosed, and internalizing stress and dissociating as predominant archetype for my experience in this world. Fast forward to, I'm 30, I'm in a doctor's office, and I have a grand mal seizure for the very first time in front of a doctor. This is why it was undiagnosed, because they always happened at home. I did have blood tests. No one knew what was up. I was not epileptic. So this was the first time I had one in front of a doctor, and I flatlined. And when I came to, he said, "You didn't tell me you had a disorder, the seizure disorder." And I looked at him like he was crazy. Even though this has been happening since I was 15, I had no idea they were seizures. I had no idea they were grand mal seizures. I just was confused as to why I was waking up thinking I urinated myself or defecated or was vomiting on the floor or couldn't move. And I just hid it out of shame.
Wow.
So when I had it in his office, I woke up to a needle of atropine loaded. He was ready to resuscitate me. That's what you do with a heart that has stopped. I was drenched. I thought I had urinated myself again. And he said, "You didn't tell me you had this disorder." And he gave me the biggest gift of my life. He said, "You had a grand mal seizure. You flatlined." And I said, "This has been happening since I was 15. And he said, "You need help." So they determined after tests I was not epileptic. What they told me was that I had a vasovagal seizure disorder that was exacerbated by stress. And when I heard that, I said, "Are you kidding me? I've been meditating for most of my life. I come from a first world, middle class, fairly benevolent lifestyle. What could be so bad that my nervous system couldn't handle normal day-to-day stress?" And this was the light bulb that said, "Lisa, your meditation practice is a bunch of escape. It's not doing what it's supposed to do, and you better fix this." So I had to study the vagus nerve that he told me was the root of my seizures, which led me to neuroscience, which led me to neuroplasticity, which led me to reading abstract and experiment and paper after paper that said the brain can adapt if we know how to tease it into focused awareness. If we know how to subdue the hijacking parts and tease into activity the parts that could change things. And so what science gave me was this, all the keys, all the equations necessary to do that. And so I backwards engineered my meditation practice. I ripped it apart and realized it was missing steps, structure. It was missing a strategic way into the brain. It was a shot in the dark, hoping to land, and that's not working for me. So I put science structure like an equation to a brain training process that pulled the best parts of my meditation practices and added a whole bunch of new things that are also present in a lot of hypnotherapy. And I practiced on myself, and what I ended up doing 11 years ago was entraining my response. I adapted my seizure response. So I adapted the moment I got a seizure halo, and I changed what that did to my body through rehearsal, through a year's worth of focused attention and rehearsal with this process. And I circumvented my first seizure 11 years ago and never had another one since. Now I've had seizure halos, and I just engage with this process immediately. And I never had one since. And at that point, when I interrupted my first seizure, I literally, a couple weeks later, gave notice at my job. I was a project manager at a very large consulting firm. And I said, I need to dedicate my life to sharing these tools because I just got a second chance, because I knew if I flatlined one more time, I wasn't coming back, because my very last seizure, I couldn't breathe on my own anymore. And I had to have my husband, for over the course of an hour, make sure that I was breathing every time I stopped. So I knew it was getting so bad that it was a life threat. And so once I found my cure, my tools, I literally devoted my life to it. I quit my job a few months later. I had no money. I had every belief humanly possible that I could share this with people in need. And that's what I did. And I never deviated from that mission. I will never deviate from that mission.
That's incredible. That is an incredible backstory. And I so appreciate you being open and vulnerable and sharing that, because I can't even imagine how scary that must have been to have been, having these seizures and not knowing what's happening to you, but knowing that it's a really serious thing. Obviously, this isn't something that happens that other people talk about in their normal lives. So this is clearly serious, but not knowing what it is or how to fix it, that had to have been terrifying.
It was terrifying, but I have to say, as someone who is a dissociator, denial was so easy for me. I mean, denial is easy for all of us when we hit our pain pictures and we don't have the tools to deal with them. We just find other things to entertain our mind. But to the point where, I mean, I had a seizure once in a food court in front of my daughter when she was 3. I flatlined. The paramedics had to take me to the emergency room. She thought I died. It was horrific.
Wow.
And this is before I actually got my diagnosis. And I remember 3 days later, after being in bed for like 72 hours, I came out of it and I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that's just what happens to everybody. And instantly went back into denial, pretending it never happened. Decades of pretending it never happened. Sometimes I'm a little bit slow. When I look back, I'm like, I don't think my dissociation was helping me any.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible. So you've mentioned meditation, and I, like I said, after going through your book and the exercises in the book, I totally get it. I totally get why, because, I also said I have this history of meditation as well. I did quite a bit of it when I had a very high stress corporate job for a number of years. And it got to the point where I was having a hard time managing the amount of stress that was on me. And so I was using that as a way to sort of regulate and help me out, because that's what people say, right? When you're stressed out, you should meditate. Okay, cool. Right. That's what I'm going to do. And so I kind of went on the aimless journey that you were on. Like, I don't know, do I sit here and count my breaths? Do I just like sit here and try not to think? Like, I'm going to listen to this like YouTube video and hopefully that'll help. And to be honest, after I would say several months, it did sort of start to help. Like I would find myself in these anxious situations and I would begin counting my breaths instead of engaging with the anxiety. So there was some positive there. I don't want to dog on, typical traditional meditation, because I think there is positive there. But when I started doing the exercises in your book, which are, I don't want to say they're very different, but they're noticeably different, and they're much more, not structure is not the right word. There's a pattern to them and there's a method to them. When I started doing those, we're talking a matter of weeks. It was a massive shift. So tell us a little bit about the method that you use, that you've developed, and how that's different from typical meditation that other people may have done.
Yeah. So the meditation that I've done, just because I'll speak from my experience, I've trained in transcendental meditation, ascension meditation, and I've also done like 3 to 4 years of formal study with the Berkeley Psychic Institute, which has a lot of energetic kind of creative visual meditations. I have a lot of different forms. Not one of them methodically asks the hijacking part of the brain to submit, while simultaneously upregulating the focused attention centers, while simultaneously helping us cross from left to right hemisphere across the midline, boosting neuroplasticity, while simultaneously giving us the option to create post-meditation triggers so we can re-trigger the meditation in day-to-day life. None of them do that. All of them are beautiful and beneficial in regulating stress. So all the meditations I've done have helped me calm down in the moment. So I'm going to give you this analogy. Let's say you have an infection in the nerve of a tooth, and now you have gum infection and you have terrible breath. The meditation, the way I was using it in the past, was like washing with mouthwash every time my breath got offensive. It was not going to the root nerve and fixing the infection. It was mitigating the symptoms. Neurosculpting, because of its process, goes to the root and deals with the infection or the belief or the pattern. So meditation, my traditional forms, are kind of like the first step of the neurosculpting 5-step process, meaning look at your breath, settle into the moment, feel your body right here, all these things which start to downregulate the stress cycle. But that's where the meditations always have stopped for me. Yep. Where we need to go to get to root patterns that have been entrained over a lifetime through trauma and stress and experience, is we have to go far underneath that. That's the first step to make the brain receptive to, okay, I'll do the work. Now what? So then the next step is I have to tease the front part of my brain into high activity, because that's going to be able to go to the pattern in the story and edit it, or even craft a new one. From there, let's say now I start getting to the root story, or I start crafting a new story with high receptivity in the brain. I want to make those edits or those changes where the brain is optimized to believe that that's really happening. And that requires recruiting more lobes of the brain. When we cross the midline of the brain from left to right, right to left, through language center entrainment and thought entrainment, science has shown that we boost the plausibility of the experience, meaning the brain thinks, oh, more of us is involved in this process. This must be really important. I'm going to store this in a much more accessible manner. It's giving that story, that edit, a higher value.
Yeah.
And that only happens, that added value only happens when we cross the midline. Meditation doesn't help us do that specifically. Neurosculpting does. Also, a lot of hypnotherapy uses similar principles, which is why hypnotherapy is also so effective to getting at the root cause of things. And then the fourth and fifth steps after you boost the plausibility of this experience in your meditation, steps 4 and 5 allow you to create your own uniquely designed post-meditation triggers, kind of like hypnosis has post-hypnotic triggers, where let's say you might have an idea in your head where hypnosis says, and when the clock strikes midnight, you'll suddenly bark like a dog. Those kind of crazy stories. Yeah. Well, when the clock strikes midnight, that's a post-hypnotic trigger, which means in your day-to-day life, when you get a reminder, you will hearken back to your hypnotherapy experience. In neurosculpting, you design your post-meditation triggers. You either use hand gestures, or you touch your body, or you give a word or an association, so that when that comes up in daily life, your brain harkens back to your edit and strengthens it. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy, where Pavlov trained the dog to salivate at the sound of the bell. We're using these principles in neurosculpting so that, let's say you go to a mountaintop and you do this beautiful neurosculpting meditation. You don't have to go to the mountaintop once a week to access this. You don't have to leave your life. You could actually use your post-meditation triggers in the car the next day, and at work, and in line at the bank. You could be accessing these post-meditation triggers so that your meditation bleeds into your daily life, so that we don't have to escape our lives to pull meditation into it. We only need to set it up from the get-go so that it's accessible. That's what was missing for me, was the application part of it, where I had to go do these weekend meditation, cycle meditations with monks from Friday night to Sunday, just to feel totally downregulated. And I did that once a month for years. And how accessible is that for people? It cost me a fortune. I couldn't do anything on the weekends. I couldn't get work done. I couldn't be social. I was there meditating from Friday through Sunday, and it was gone by Monday morning. I went back to work, and that brain state I had affected was already gone, and I was back to square one with my stress level for the week. And then, of course, in my mind, I don't have time to meditate throughout the week, so now I have to go book another cycle weekend for next month, and I'm counting the days till I can find relief. That's not pragmatic.
Right.
Neurosculpting is an entrainment process. So the more you do it, the more real it becomes. The more real it becomes, the more it bleeds into everyday life. And we give you tools to pull it into everyday life. And then, of course, the other components of neurosculpting are self-reflective exercises to help you find your stories, nutrition changes to help you optimize your brain so that you don't have to work 5 times as hard to get the same work done. There are ways you can eat that will absolutely hijack emotional regulation. And so we teach people how to eat to optimize their meditative experiences and their entrainment. We teach people about their sleep patterns and how that plays into it, their exercise and daily routines, even their social situations, to help them identify all the very sneaky, subtle ways our patterns creep up. Because usually when we notice our stress patterns, they've been creeping up for a long time. And if we could get methods of identification and awareness much sooner, then we don't have to let them inflame to those levels. We can entrain far quicker. So, I mean, that's kind of a very broad discussion of neurosculpting. But for the listeners out there, there's a very succinct 5-step graphic on the website you could download and look at it and read the description of the 5-step process. And then we can talk at the end of this about ways you can practice.
Yeah. And, you know, that 5-step process that you're talking about, that is this structure and this equation almost that you go through in each one of these exercises. And you can really, you know, as I was listening to you in this audiobook and going through these exercises, you can really tell that, like, oh, wow, okay, I feel kind of surprised right now. Like, that's not what I expected her to say. Or, wow, I'm really relaxed right now. Or, I actually feel a physical change in this certain part of my body. And now she's asking me to, like, touch that part of my body because, you know, to really deepen some of that learning that you're doing. And
absolutely.
One example that I've been thinking about for a little while, because sometimes when people hear, it seems like it's people who need it the most. It's people who are extremely stressed out, who don't tend to buy into meditation or anything that looks or smells like it, who maybe really need it, but don't think that this type of thing is useful or worthwhile in spite of all the evidence. There are a number of very well supported, very well proven, you know, theories in social cognitive psychology, exactly as you mentioned. You know, Pavlov, big part of a lot of, you know, the theory in social cognitive psychology deals with those same types of things that Pavlov was working with the dogs. We go through basically habit formation within the way that we cognitively store information. How do you create new habits? And that's kind of what you're doing here. And with the trigger that you were mentioning, you know, you mentioned hypnotherapy and other things like that. For anybody who's skeptical, I promise you have already experienced this. One example that I've been sort of ruminating on a little bit is if you think back to an old relationship, like a decade ago, like a relationship that was a long time ago, many of us have been in the situation where during that relationship, you're sort of developing, you don't realize it, but you're developing triggers that remind you of that person. I guarantee so many of you have been in the situation where you, 10 years later, have smelled the cologne that person wore, and you're instantly reminded of an emotion that you had when you were with them, maybe how the breakup felt, maybe how it felt when the relationship was at its best. One way or the other, that smell being a trigger immediately like jogs your brain back to where it was before. It's something that happens to us so frequently. And this is really saying, okay, how do we intentionally create a trigger that is useful, that brings our brain to a place that we need it to be, instead of going off into crazy land, in my case, and, you know, death spiraling down this anxiety track. And so it was amazing, like the process that you go through in these meditations and in these exercises to create those triggers. You legitimately can then later on start to use them to put yourself back into that more deliberative, and in my case, more like thoughtful, like able to be logical, able to be sort of awake and, you know, regulate myself. I was able to use those triggers to do that. And it is like, it's like magical. It's crazy.
You know, but see, here's the amazing thing. Our brain is doing this magic all the time. All the time. It's just happening at the subconscious level. So this example you gave is great. You have everyone who's listening right now has a million post-hypnotic triggers
Yes.
that they have unintentionally created in their life. The sound of that bell, the song on the radio that flashes you back to prom, the smell of the cologne that brings you back to your first love or your first breakup.
That time you drank too much Jägermeister and you just think about it and you get sick to your
and
stomach.
You get nauseous.
Like,
exactly.
Yes, those associations are so common.
Okay, so all neurosculpting is the equation behind how that works. Neurosculpting was like I pulled the curtain back and there was the wizard standing on the ladder. And so it was no longer a mystery. The equation was right there. So all I did was articulate an equation for what the brain is already doing all the time. You're already doing it. You're already all neurosculpting unintentionally, which if left to our subconscious will continue on in a way that is self-preservation based, meaning we're going to map more easily to fear, contraction, and negativity because it's going to help give us scripts and patterns for self-protection. So when you know the equation of that unintentional process and you have the empirical proof that it has happened 1,000,000 times in your lifetime, then all you have to do is practice the equation with intention to create all the edits and all the new stories. We're doing nothing different in neurosculpting than our brain does every single minute of the day. We're just articulating it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And some of the lead up to that, to creating those triggers, it puts your brain in this position where it's very receptive to laying down new habits and forming new associations in the same way, like you mentioned, in the same way that it does when we're actually moving through life and physically having those experiences. It just puts us there without actually having to physically, like you mentioned, be on that mountaintop or whatever the geography might have to be. All right, I feel like we've probably sufficiently made people very curious about this practice and how to get started. How would you suggest somebody get started applying? Well, first of all, actually, let's back up just a little bit. Who are the right people? Like, what is the type of thing? I've already talked about postpartum depression and PTSD, definitely there. Who are the type of people that this can help? Like, what does it help you avoid or improve or do?
I hesitate to say everyone, but my belief inside says everyone. But I'll give you a list of past student and client issues that have been successfully addressed with a neurosculpting practice. We have students that range everywhere from wanting to just increase their connection to clarity and purpose, all the way to depression, addiction, OCD, all the way to suicidal, sexual trauma, war trauma, first responder trauma, patterns that come with all of that spectrum, everything from traumatic brain injury, trauma, and the emotional, mental, and physical fallout from that, to seizure disorders, to spinal cord injury and ALS. So we have an extremely broad reach. We have an arm of our work that works with first responders, an arm of our work that works with the self-help population, a whole arm of our work that deals with our adaptive students who are in wheelchairs, either with MS, ALS, or spinal cord injury. We have traumatic brain injury survivors who are now certified facilitators because this has been their modality of healing. And by and large, most of the student body are people trying to work through the thick mud of depression, anxiety, stress, and what they feel is like an unmanageable emotional life.
I agree that, I can see after going through, somewhat of a program, I don't know the book, I guess, but after going through that, I can see where everything that you named could really benefit. And also someone who just thinks, I don't know, I don't have any of that stuff, I'm just kind of normal. I can 100% see how this type of practice could just throw gas on somebody who feels like, their life is just normal and whatever, and I don't really have any big problems, like, oh my God, like you can really just actualize with this and make your experience of living day to day even better. That's who this helps. How do people get started? How can somebody learn a little bit more and actually even have their first experience with these 5 steps that you've talked about? Because it's not something that I hadn't encountered this anywhere else. And it is very, there's a method to it. And it's not just that out of the blue, you can just do this to yourself. So where do people go to get their first experience?
Right. You go to neurosculptinginstitute.com. And because I am a huge fan of pragmatic application-based tools, if you go to the website, you can read all about the process. But specifically, if you go to the Learning Store tab and you scroll all the way to the bottom, we've got 2 free classes. And guess what? They're really free. You don't even have to sign up for anything. For real free, like you just click play and there's the class. Amazing. 2 video classes. One is a 1-hour class done for stress management. The original audience was first responders, so there might be some references to very first responder-like situations. The other is a 1-hour class that is a 20-minute neurosculpting practice, a 20-minute breath practice, and a 20-minute nutrition training. So those are 2 absolutely free classes, and that is where I would suggest you start. From there, to maintain a practice. I've made it so that no one has excuses, because I hate excuses.
You and I share that in common.
Yeah, I made them most of my life. I'm really good at sniffing them out. So I set up the program so that you can't have any. So here's what I mean. We have classes at the Institute that you could drop into live stream. Anything I teach is generally live streamed. So wherever you are in the world, that's not an excuse. And then you say, but Lisa, I can't wake up in the middle of the night because I live in Europe. Well, that's not a problem, because we have a Learning Store with audio download classes, so you can download it and do it at your own time. We also have online immersions that are self-paced, that are video learning and transcripts and interactive guided meditations. All of this is in the Learning Store. We also on Amazon have a ton of books and audio programs in CD form or on Audible that you can start your practice with. And we also have certified facilitators. You could always go into our directory or email info@neurosculptinginstitute.com and say, I want to work with someone one-on-one. Hey, I want to work with you, Lisa, one-on-one. Do you have room? Or I want to work with someone do you have anyone in California? Or do you have anyone who does Skype sessions? Because I'm remote. So we've made it so that you can have bite-sized chunks of experiences all the way to deep immersions so that you can have this practice in your life. And lastly, what I want to say is ongoing meditation is the key. So we have a membership also in the Learning Store. It's ridiculously cheap. You get 2 live stream meditation events a month. And if you're not present for them, then they're available within 20 minutes of airing and you can download them. So you can have your monthly guided meditation every day. You get free downloads. You get our annual journal, and you get that every single month, and you get a community of online meditators. That's where the real work happens, is in the practice. That was a lot. But
no, I love it though. I love it though. And I mean, just 100% transparency, total full disclosure to anybody who's listening to this. Like, I'm pushing this extremely hard because, like I said, I can't overemphasize the shift and the change that was made in how I was experiencing my day-to-day life. So I would, these triggering events that happened as a result of postpartum depression, they came out of nowhere. It took me the longest time. We're talking months. I mean, like, I sympathize with you not realizing you were having seizures, because I didn't even realize that there was something wrong with me as I was death spiraling into this craziness that I was experiencing over and over and over again in the same situation. Talk about being slow and not catching, picking up on it. But it took me so long to even realize that once I did realize it, I started anticipating and fearing that happening to me, even when it wasn't. And so we're talking day-to-day life was just incredibly impacted by this thing that happened that should be a normal, like happy thing. Like I had a kid, but so in 100% transparency, full disclosure, I'm pushing this and I'm so excited for people to go to your website and try out your courses and get involved and follow Lisa on social media, because she does trainings on social media live. And there is zero compensation here. I'm making nothing from referring Lisa and her work to those of you listening. It has just been so transformational that I had to reach out to her and had to ask you to come on, because it's just it's a message that I couldn't help share with, the folks who follow this podcast and follow my blog.
Well, I am so thrilled. I'm always thrilled to hear from people who have used the process and found relief, because that's what it did for me. And that's why I do it. So when I hear these stories of, oh my God, this helped, that's why I do what I do. And you have no idea, even when you think you're sending me a little message or, oh, is she too busy to read this? I live for those messages. Aww. And so I love that it helped you, and I love that you invited me to talk to your audience, because I'm sure a lot of the women out there can relate to some of what we talked about.
Oh, so much so. And yeah, so much so. Yes. All right. Before I let you go today, I have to ask you the final question that I ask every single person who is on the Women Inspired podcast. We have been curating a Spotify Power playlist of motivational songs that people can listen to when they need a little bit of a pick-me-up. And as a music addict, I'm sure you can appreciate how powerful music can be to get you in the right state of mind to be able to go attack your day and get the things done that you need to get done. So I have to ask you for your favorite motivational song to add to our playlist.
I've got a lot, but there is one that so speaks to me, and it's not a new one. It's Jefferson Airplane. It is White Rabbit, and it is the most soul-wrenching, powerful anthem for my life. It's all about one pill makes you smaller, one makes you large, and it ends with feed your head.
Ah, that's so perfect. I love it. Oh my God, I love it. I can't thank you enough, like I said, for taking the time and coming on, for sharing your backstory and being so open and vulnerable, and just for putting this, figuring all of this out, and then being so open and devoting your life to sharing this important work with other people and creating these resources for everybody to access online. It's just such a wonderful gift. And I for one, really appreciate it, but I know there are countless others out there who have experienced so much positivity because of this. Thank you so much, honestly.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was great to talk to you, and I look forward to more.
All right, you guys, I really, really hope you enjoyed that episode with Lisa Wimberger. I have one single thing that I want to highlight from her episode, and it is short and sweet, but extremely important. And I'm going to be super clear. If you have ever struggled with anything in the realm of mental health, whether it is depression, anxiety, something due to having a baby, postpartum depression, something else, OCD, any of the above or anything else, it is 100% worth it to try to find something that will help alleviate that issue and help you feel better. So many times on this podcast, I talk about living life to the fullest and making the most of every day, and how important the time that we have is, because we're not getting any more of it. That right there is one of the reasons, just one, why it is so important for you to take this seriously. Take your mental health seriously. The experience that you have day to day is so determined by how your mind is working and how healthy it is and how strong it is. And it's worth it. Please take it from me as someone who has been there. It is absolutely worth it to get yourself healthy and put yourself in the best possible situation. Now, if you listened to this episode and you did not listen to the episode prior to this, where I talked about my struggle with postpartum depression and the resulting PTSD that came after that, please go back and listen to that episode. And maybe you might, or someone you know, might relate to that story or one that sounds like it in some way. Please, please reach out to a professional and get help. Do everything you can to get yourself healthy, because I am telling you, I have been on both sides of that coin. I today, with a clear, strong, vibrant, healthy mind, can tell you I remember what it felt like to be in that position where my mind was not healthy, where I wasn't feeling good, where I was white knuckling almost every day just to get through some basic things that should not have been causing me the level of anxiety that they were. I know what that was like. This is so much better than that. It is worth it. You are worth it. Try to get yourself help. Lisa's method is something that worked for me. I encourage you to try things until you find something that does work. Talk to a therapist, talk to a counselor. Go to Lisa's website at the Neurosculpting Institute and try out some of her free resources or get her book on Audible. I highly suggest the audiobook to do the exercises that she has in the book, because she actually guides you through several exercises during the book, real time. I highly suggest you try it. You have nothing to lose, and you have this amazingly vibrant, strong, healthy mind to gain. If there's somebody in your life, maybe it's you, maybe it's someone else, who could benefit from this message, who could benefit from Lisa's work, or just needs to hear, hey, you are not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. You did nothing to ask for this, but it is worth it to fix it. And it is up to you to take that step, and it's worth it. If you know somebody who needs to hear that, please share this episode with them, because I'm incredibly passionate about it. I've been there, and now I'm on the other side, and I'm telling you, I'm here on the other side pulling for you. So please, please do what you can to get yourself healthy and strong and vibrant and amazing, because you are worth it. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this content. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, if you're ready to start making changes in your life to align your day with your goals and your values and what fills you up, I have a free tool to help you get started. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to get immediate access to my free Life by Design life blueprinting tool. I designed this tool using theory from the fields of psychology and design thinking, and it will absolutely help you get clear on the areas of your life that are serving you and those that aren't. Clarity is a critical first step before you can design your own best life. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Until next time, have an inspiring week.